Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that aims to redefine what it means to reach our full potential by exploring how movement and mindset impacts our lives and how we can all work to show up as the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder at TEC, and before we get started, I've got an all call. If you're a coach or an entrepreneur in the health and fitness industry who's trying to grow your business without burning out, I want to personally invite you to apply for the Growth Circle. The Growth Circle is our business accelerator program at TEC, and it's designed specifically to serve providers like you in the health and fitness industry. People who are incredible at what they do, but they need a proven framework and real support to actually scale. Let's be real, running a coaching business can feel like a grind. You're juggling programming and client communication, marketing, admin work, and somehow you're still trying to grow your business. That's where the Growth Circle comes in. Inside the program, we help you nail down your ideal client and get really clear on what your offer is. We help you build a consistent lead gen process so you're not wondering where your next client comes from. We help you improve your sales skills without feeling salesy. And most importantly, create systems and support so that you're not doing it alone. You'll be a part of a driven community of other business owners in this space who get it. We host regular group calls, team intensives, mastermind sessions to make sure you're never stuck trying to figure it out in a silo. So if you're tired of winging it, if you're tired of trying to do it all by yourself, to recreate the wheel, figure out what levers to pull, what's broken and what's not, if you're ready to turn your passion into a business that actually works for you, I want to invite you to apply. You can find the link to the Growth Circle in our show notes. And I want you to really think about what's best for you and your business. I want you to think about how your business can really make an impact on the industry and how it can give you the life that you're excited about and make the money that you deserve, working with the clients that you love, spending time investing in the things that you care about and you're passionate about. So if this is a problem you're committed to solving and you want to take your business to the next level, again, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to hear from you. Hello, welcome back to Endurance Minded. We're going to be diving into a touchy subject today. I think it's going to hit a lot of you in a different way, depending on your internal framework, depending on your experience, depending on your mindset. I know it's been something that's been a journey for me. It's been something that I continue to grapple with, figure out how it shows up in my life, what I'm supposed to do with the information, how I'm supposed to continue to move forward in a way that feels productive, but also sustainable. And that topic is hypervigilance. We're going to talk about high performance without hypervigilance. I'm going to go into detail about what hypervigilance is, what it isn't, and then we're going to talk about how to recognize the signs that you are stuck in a state of hypervigilance, how to continue to set goals and to be a high performer without remaining or staying in a state of hypervigilance. And to set the stage, I want to just ask a few questions, and I want you to see if you recognize yourself in any of this language. So what if your obsession with being on, in quotes, is the very thing that is capping your performance? What if the constant drive, the constant thinking, the constant weighing all the different options and opportunities, what if that's the thing that's actually in your way? What if in your pursuit of performance, the way that you're trying to get there is the thing that's actually holding you back? So you're training, you're building, you're optimizing, you're always thinking about all the options, but you're mentally fried and you think that's normal. You feel like that's your baseline. You also feel like potentially that's okay. You're uniquely suited to handle the stress, that you can do it in a way that no one else can. You have a unique capacity to handle the load and that mental and physical fatigue that you are now accustomed to. And if any of that feels familiar, if any of that feels like thoughts or questions that have run through your own mind, then this episode is going to be about naming and ultimately breaking the hidden pattern of hypervigilance so that you can perform better by doing less. And I know that at face value, that sounds ridiculous. If any of what I said and if any of what I continue to talk about resonates, then doing less is not going to be something that is in your vernacular. It's not going to be something that feels like home base. It's not going to feel comfortable. It's certainly, and sure as hell, not going to feel productive. But what I want to outline today is a world where both of those things can exist, that you can be a high performer, you can strive and be growing and reaching and accomplishing, but not at the expense ultimately of your health. But I think even more than that, or more specifically, not at the expense of your enjoyment of the process of those things, not at the expense of your ability to show up and do those things well, to feel energized, to feel healthy, to feel rested, to feel at peace. And so I want to start by just framing and really defining what hypervigilance is in the context that we're going to talk about it today. So there are really two types of hypervigilance. There is the hypervigilance of trauma in psychology, and then there is the hypervigilance of a high performance culture. We're going to be talking about the latter, but I want to define both so that it's very clear what I'm talking about. And so you know exactly where you fall and whom specifically I'm referencing. So hypervigilance as it relates to trauma is a heightened state of sensory sensitivity. So this is often caused by PTSD or chronic stress. It's when someone is always scanning for danger, they're hyper aware of their surroundings, emotions, perceived threats. This is exhausting, it's involuntary, and it's protective. And this is a very real response to very real trauma. And so, what I'm going to talk about today is not that. It is not individuals who have had a very real psychological response to very real trauma that is now causing them to represent themselves and move through the world in a way that's in alignment with some of the things that I just mentioned. What I am talking about is hypervigilance in high performance culture. So this is less about trauma and more about over optimization. So it's a chronic state of alertness. It's when someone is mentally always on, they're planning, they're analyzing, they're reviewing, anticipating, optimizing, even in the moments meant for rest. And that's really the key piece. It's not that those things are inherently bad. It's not that being on is inherently bad. It's not that planning, analyzing, reviewing, anticipating, optimizing, none of those things are inherently bad. They are only counterproductive when we can't turn them off, when we can't actually rest. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is that real lack of rest. It's the real hidden cost of doing something that we think is eliciting the results and the response that we desire, but in fact, it's running in opposition of that exact thing. And so, just to highlight again, I want to be very clear. The key differences is that the trauma-based hypervigilance is a survival response. Again, a very real response to very real trauma outside of the individual's control. High achiever hypervigilance, again, hypervigilance for the overachiever, is a performance control response. but it triggers the same thing. But I want to represent the key differences here again, that the high achiever hypervigilance is it's performance control. So it's an attempt to control. It's not an attempt or it's not a response to trauma. And I'm going to give you actually several instances or signs that you are in a hypervigilant state, even if you think you're just, I'll use quotes, dialed in. And I can't tell you how many times I've said this. This is me, to be clear. The reason that I'm talking about this is because it's something that I have struggled with massively and continue to try to understand and wrestle and cope with as someone who is a very, very high achiever. My pressure that I put on myself is, I would categorize it as extreme. And yet I'm someone who still wants to enjoy life. I'm someone who still values my relationships. I'm someone who wants to enjoy the process. I work so hard and set such lofty goals because I recognize the opportunities that presents. I enjoy engaging in things deeply and intently and going all in. But that can't be at the expense of actually enjoying the process, actually being able to rest so that I can show up and actually produce results. So here's some signs that you are in a hypervigilant state. You feel guilty or anxious when you're resting. So you've taken downtime, you've set that aside, but it doesn't feel like rest because you feel like you should be doing something else. If you're resting, it's wasted time. That's what's going through your mind. If you're mentally rehearsing tomorrow's exercise, tomorrow's business meeting, a call that you have, when you're trying to rest, specifically when you're trying to fall asleep, so you can't turn your brain off, or you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about those things. If you default to problem-solving mode, so you're constantly tweaking systems, training plans, workflows, always trying to figure out how to optimize the thing to get the most out of it. You struggle to enjoy moments of downtime. So when you're presented with the moment of downtime, you struggle to enjoy it because you feel like you should, put that word in quotes, be doing something else. Again, very similar to the guilt and anxiety that comes with resting, is it doesn't feel like it's what you should be doing. It feels like you should be productive, that it's wasted time. You are always checking your metrics. So this could be revenue, this could be followers, emails, training data, whatever your metrics are. We all have access to tons of metrics. You're constantly checking those things relatively compulsively because you're looking for some sign that there's an opportunity for optimization. You're looking for a way to engage, right? You're checking email because you want to be busy. It gives you a reason to not rest, just as a couple of examples. And you equate your productivity with your self-worth. So the more productive that you are, the better you feel about yourself. Essentially, or specifically, the more perceived productivity that you have, the more you equate that with your self-worth. So again, being quote unquote productive when you can and should be resting makes you feel like you are a better person or a more worthy person. Now, so if any of those things sound like they might be in alignment with how you move through the world, and I want to be clear, it's not all of those things. I'm not saying that you have to have all of those. There's just some examples. I'm also not saying that you have to have represent those things at all times. Not like every single day that you're particularly fraught with all of those instances or some of those instances, but I just want you to recognize the language. And I think that if you are this individual, or if you are predisposed or inclined to be in a hypervigilant state, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not unclear, and it's not hard to find once you put some language to it. I remember the first time I heard this and started to dig into what this means, I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. Of course. Right? I knew it. I had just created a narrative and built up all of these different systems and infrastructures that supported those processes, right? That had supported me continuing to carry out that approach to life. And I continued to, even pull people into my circle that told me that that was what optimization looked like. So I'd built a life that told me that I was right. Well, as soon as I heard language that gave me the other side of the coin or presented that as an option, again, this hypervigilant state, cortisol, addiction, dopamine addiction, cortisol response, which I'll get into in a second, it was so clear to me what was going on. So I don't think that it's going to be particularly hard to find if you are someone who resonates with any of what I'm talking about at this stage of our conversation. But there's a real cost to all this. And the real cost here is, again, I want to just highlight a few things. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to break down what this actually looks like from a kind of a scientific perspective. So I want to do a bit of a deep dive into cortisol and the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. But I want to first, before I do that, I want you to understand the real cost of what we're talking about here. Because this is not just a nice to have. This is not just it would be interesting if I could shift that. It would be cool if I felt a little different. No, there is a very, very real cost here. The first, and I think the most real cost, is cognitive fatigue. So your brain uses energy to scan constantly, even subconsciously. It leads to things like decision fatigue, creative blocks, reduced mental flexibility. So much energy gets used because we're never resting. There's also emotional numbness. So hypervigilance dulls our emotional range. You're so focused on the control that you can't access intuition or joy, right? We've put up such tight boundaries for ourselves in order to over control and over optimize that the things on the periphery are not really available to us anymore, or they don't come as easily. It takes much more to actually find joy in something, or to tap into our intuition and trust our gut, because we've, again, created such a narrow pathway to how we define success. Our nervous system literally gets exhausted. There's this constant low-grade activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which, again, I'll break down later. That's the fight or flight. It impairs recovery, digestion, sleep. When we are in this state, it impacts everything. And so there's just kind of, when we're always on, it literally is tapping into our nervous system regulation and wearing us down, kind of slowly degrading our ability to actually feel good in our own body. We see plateaued performance a lot in this state. So when we are hypervigilant, again, we're just fatigued. Our body has this kind of low grade, run down, always on. It's like putting your car in park and pushing the gas pedal and ramping up the RPMs. It's just, we're not idling. We're always at 3,000 RPMs. We're always going a little bit harder than we should. And then when we have to go hard, we ramp up even more. And so that's just going to burn more gas, right? If you sit in the parking lot with your car parked at 3,000 RPMs, your car's going to run out of gas pretty fast, right? That tank is not going to last as long. We see this with plateaued performance. Again, you're training, you're working out hard, you're doing all the right things, but adaptation is slow because you're never truly recovering. Again, those RPMs are always slightly elevated. We see it also impact our relationships. This is a tough one to say, and I don't want to overreach here and say that this is happening to everyone, but we see disconnected relationships so often with hypervigilance. Our mind is always focused on the next step, so we're not truly present with people, right? We're always thinking about what to do, where to go, what to optimize, what's happening next, all these little pieces and parts. Again, we're trying to just keep the tightest grip on it and control. That doesn't create much availability for relationships. And we also start to mix our identity in with this hypervigilance. So we start believing that we're really only as good as our last performance or the results we get or the productivity that we put out into the world or the people that respond to us or get back to us. Or there's so much layered in here, and it's so easy and truthfully very quick for this to erode the confidence that we have in ourselves and our self-worth. So let's talk about, I hope that gives you a clear understanding of just the general framework. Again, I want you to understand, one, do you see yourself in any of that language? And two, recognizing the real cost there. But now I want to get into the weeds a little bit, and I want to break down what nervous system regulation is. I want to talk about cortisol. I want to talk about expansion versus contraction. I want to give you some real details here to understand and to know that I'm not full of shit. I'm not just talking about this because it's something that is fun to talk about. There is very, very real science behind this, and our bodies are set up to respond in a very clear and distinct way. And with hypervigilance, or when we are hypervigilant, it pulls our body into a pathway that is not optimized. It is not good for us to be in this state long term. So let's talk about kind of like nervous system 101. Nervous system has two main states. This is very, very simplified. I, of course, am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist, but this is from my own research and from my own understanding of me just trying to work through this as well as helping others work through this. I have conversations. These are the people in my circle. I attract people that are hypervigilant because I love being around high performers. This is the high performers dilemma ultimately. And so this is coming from just that very real data. And so the nervous system has two main states, right? We have the sympathetic and we have the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight, flight, focus activation, right? We've heard that. It's our fight or flight mechanism. That's your sympathetic. Your parasympathetic is your rest. So it's rest, digest, recover, restore. Both of these are necessary, right? These are the two main pathways, the two ways that our nervous system kind of compartmentalizes the things in our lives and how we move through the world. Both are necessary, but most high performers live 90+% in sympathetic mode. So without intentional down regulation, our body stays activated. We stay in that sympathetic state. Over time, this becomes the new normal. Now, we are not meant to live the majority of our lives in our sympathetic state. Think about any of the instances you've heard about fight or flight. It is a response to danger, right? Evolutionarily, lion comes up, we switch into our sympathetic nervous system and we run. We fight for our lives. We get away from that lion and we go back to our parasympathetic nervous system. right? So very short periods of time where we are designed to function optimally in this sympathetic. It's good for us. It's what puts the fire under our ass. If we stay there 90+% of the time, we can't run from a lion 90% of our lives, right? Just think about what that actually means. It means that we are literally fighting for our lives the majority of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time. So I think we can see that that's not optimal. We're not going to do our best work. We're not going to build our best relationships. We're not going to move our body forward when we are running for our lives 90% of the time. So without that intentional downregulation, we stay activated. And again, this becomes the new normal. This is also a really key point. Our bodies will adapt and adjust. So if you're sitting there and you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That language resonates, but I feel fine. I feel okay. I'm not low on energy. I feel sharp. I feel sure. Absolutely. I hear you. Our bodies are incredible machines. They will adapt. They'll overcome. They'll try to optimize with the state that we put it in. It doesn't mean that it's optimal. I told myself that story for a long, long, long time, right? I could sleep a few hours a night. I feel fine. I can still train. I can still do. Ultimately, what happened is eventually my body broke down, right? I told myself that story for about a decade, and it remained true for about a decade. But then eventually, it gave way. So there is a point where it will break. So I want to reiterate that even though you might be sitting there listening to this and you say, well, yeah, I resonate with that, but I feel fine. Well, again, the body is an incredible machine. It will adapt, but that does not mean that it is optimal. So now that we have parasympathetic and sympathetic defined, let's talk about cortisol. This is the main player here. So cortisol it's not bad. We hear about cortisol a lot. It helps regulate our energy, inflammation, alertness. It is a massively helpful, useful, needed tool that our body deploys. But when it is chronically elevated due to hypervigilance, so when we are in our sympathetic nervous system, cortisol gets deployed. And that elevated cortisol leads to all kinds of issues. So it leads to poor sleep. It leads to reduced immune function. This is one we see with lots of hypervigilance, lots of high achievers, also lots of time being sick, right? Lots of time fighting off illness, on the verge of being sick, not quite feeling 100%, this reduced immune function. Essentially, again, your body's just worn down. It's tired. It doesn't have the energy to fight back anymore. It's hanging on by a thread. That increased cortisol definitely shows up in that way. Decreased muscle repair. So we see this a lot on the athletic side. When you have sustained and heightened cortisol levels, we see a reduced muscle repair, primarily because we see big changes in our immune response. We see big changes in our inflammatory response. Our bodies are trying to protect themselves, and so it reduces that muscle repair. It increases inflammation. It's really hard to recover. We also see increased fat storage. This is kind of that evolutionary response where, again, we're running from the lion. The body says, well, hold on to the fat. We might need it. Right? That's basically what's happening. Is it's hard to, if you feel like maybe that body composition piece isn't quite right, or you're retaining fat, or you're not quite where you want to be, you're putting on weight, but you're still exercising a lot. This could certainly be one of the markers, is that we see increased fat storage, specifically around the abdominal area. That's a protection mechanism from our body. That heightened increased cortisol tells our body to protect our organs, right? Give your body the fat it needs to continue to survive. And then brain fog, irritability. These are all just some of the signs of that chronic elevation of cortisol, which is due to hypervigilance, right? There's other ways to increase our cortisol. Again, I'm talking about specifically with this hypervigilant state we're seeing these sustained levels of cortisol increase. And that's really, really having a negative impact on our body. High cortisol also blocks access to parasympathetic. So you never feel fully recovered because you can't access that other neural pathway. You can't access that other nervous system opportunity, right? So again, we're essentially just stuck on the sympathetic highway and we can't get to the parasympathetic highway. That's why, even on rest days, we just never feel like we can turn the corner. We stay on that road long enough, to use a metaphor, we stay on that sympathetic highway long enough. Well, eventually the parasympathetic highway is too far away. It's hard to get there, right? They're not running in parallel. They're not connected anymore. Again, we're spending 90% of our time in that sympathetic pathway. Well, the parasympathetic is not going to be particularly available when it's not utilized consistently. And so that high cortisol really blocks that parasympathetic dominance, which is really what we want. The parasympathetic is meant to be the dominant pathway. And then we tap in selectively to that sympathetic pathway that gives us access to all of that energy that we need, that sharpness, that crispness, that drive. So when this happens, I want us to think about, one of the things for me that has been really impactful is to think about expansive versus contractive. So, I'm thinking about, okay, well, how does this affect me? Right? What does this mean when I'm in this state? Essentially, like, why should I care? Right? If I'm still getting stuff done, well, okay. Expansive versus contractive, expansion versus contraction. This framework has really been valuable for me in helping me kind of see the big picture. And I want to give you just some parallels, some ways that this shows up differently. So in an expansive mindset, and I want you to think about this through the lens of these nervous system states. So expansive is your parasympathetic. Again, rest, recover, restore. Contraction is your sympathetic. Again, fight or flight. So in expansive, we're calm, we're creative, we're present. In contraction, again, in our sympathetic, we're anxious, we're tight, we're reactive. When we're expansive, we're big picture thinking, right? We're vision based. When we're contractive, we have tunnel vision. This so often limits the possibilities. Tunnel vision, the singular focus, is a very valuable tool. When we can deploy it effectively, when we can tap into that sympathetic nervous system at the right times and have access to that tunnel vision, that clear, concise vision in the direction of one thing, deployed appropriately and for small doses, it is an incredible tool. It's a skill to be mastered, and I think it serves people very well. However, when we have tunnel vision for the majority of our lives, we have blinders on. We can't see other opportunities. We are not open to other ways of thinking. What that does is we miss opportunities, right? Too much tunnel vision, too long in that tunnel, we can't see what's going on in the outside world, right? So if you think about a tunnel is a necessary tool to get you from point A to point B, to get you on the other side of that mountain. If you think about the mountain as a goal in your life, something that you want to overcome, something you need to process, the tunnel's great. But eventually you want to come out the other side. You want to see the world again. You want to look at all the opportunities. So too much tunnel vision, too focused, too long in that sympathetic nervous system, we're really going to miss out. When we're expansive, we're collaborative. When we're contracting, we want control. Right? This is what really starts to impact our relationships. This massively impacts us in the workplace. If you're in a leadership or management position, you want to be collaborative, right? You want to leverage your team. You want to leverage the resources of your organization. If you're trying to control everything, you are running yourself down, right? You're not taking in and leveraging the opportunities and expertise and collaborative input that is available to you, which ultimately means I think that you're getting you're getting less output, right? You're getting a lesser result because one person can't have all the best ideas. It's impossible. If you're expansive, you trust the process. If you're contracting, you're obsessed with the outcomes. This is the biggest piece with training for sure. This parlay this into other areas of our lives, but certainly trusting the process, enjoying the training and enjoying pushing our bodies and showing up day after day. That's what makes the process enjoyable. If we're obsessed with the outcomes, it's really hard to stay in that. I've talked about that at length on this show. And then lastly, if we're expansive, we're grounded, we're confident. If we're contracting, we have imposter syndrome. We're constantly overthinking. Again, we're tying our self-worth to our productivity. So I just want you to just think about those two columns. Those are just a few adjectives, ways to think about that expansive versus contracting, that parasympathetic versus sympathetic. Which one sounds better? Which one sounds like you would feel better, that you would enjoy life more, that you would have more opportunities? I think we could all agree that if we spent the majority of our time in the expansive mindset, that would yield much different and ultimately, I believe, much better results. So let's talk about how to shift out of hypervigilance into something that is more sustainable. So I don't want to leave you here just, okay, great, Taylor, you told me what it looks like, what it sounds like. I can hear myself in some of those things. What does it look like to change? And this is the big piece. And this is where I really want to reiterate. I'm not advocating that high performance is a bad thing. I'm in no means, or by no means, and in no way advocating that being lazy or pulling back or not driving is the answer. The goal should be, in my opinion, that we understand how to be high performers in the absence of hypervigilance, in the absence of sustained cortisol, in the absence of staying in that sympathetic state. And what I've found is it doesn't require a massive shift. It doesn't require a wholesale overhaul of how we move through the world, how we process information, even really how we think about things. What it requires is some intentional time and ways that we train our bodies to recognize that parasympathetic pathway is available to us. And I think that's really the key, is that we just need to bring those roads a little closer together. If you're someone who's been on that sympathetic highway and you're running 90% of your time in that place, we just want to open up the opportunity for your body to get back to what it knows how to do, its default state, which is access that parasympathetic, bring down those cortisol levels, actually rest so that you can be a high performer, right? And that's really the crux here, is that we get better results. The thing that we think we're accomplishing, the thing that we're driving at, is the thing that's actually taken the biggest hit, right? Our work, our training, our relationship, our life, whatever the thing is that we're hyper vigilant about, or certainly typically the things that we're hyper vigilant about, those are the things that are taking the biggest hit because we're so run down. We can't see clearly. Again, tunnel vision, the relationships are hurting. We're not able to be collaborative. We're not thinking clearly. We don't ever feel rested. So there's actually a switch here. And the switch is so that we can be high performers, but we can be high performers that actually yield results, that actually elicit a high performance response and a high performance outcome. So a few tactical tools. Actually, I'm going to give you 5 tactical tools here. 1, daily off switches. So I want you to schedule non-input time. So no metrics, no screens, no tasks. This can be a lot of different things. For me, walks are really important. I don't take my phone with me. Could be just sitting for a second, literally 5 minutes. Just take a beat, stretch. Putting your legs up the wall is something that is incredible. Had Erin Taylor on the show a while back, and she talked a lot about how to access recovery amidst a really busy environment, and that it's not a huge lift, or certainly not as big of a lift as we think it might be. So I want you to schedule non-input time. I actually want you to schedule it too. Put it on your calendar. High performers perform best when it's on your schedule. So when is that? Quiet time in the morning, right? No input. So it's not quiet time and watching the news. It's not quiet time and scrolling through your phone. Just sit with your cup of coffee and just collect yourself. Take a beat, right? Take a beat after work. Push back from your desk. Take a second between calls. Schedule that non-input time. Next is I want you to think about a mental cool down routine. So just like with a physical cool down, this is for your brain. So this is more in the active positioning, right? This is the walk. This is breath work. Creative play is something. So this is all kinds of stuff. If you have kids, this could be anything. It's jumping on a trampoline. It's, rolling around in the grass. It's, kicking a soccer ball. It's, things that you don't normally do. Tapping into other places in your brain that are not task oriented. Right? What that does is it tells your brain that it's okay to do some things that are ancillary. And then you get that dopamine response. It feels good to do that. It feels good to take a walk, to take some deep breaths, to do some mobility work, to do it without input, right? Do it without a screen, do it without music, do it just for the sake of doing it. Next, I want you to think about performance anchoring. So these are a few repeatable things, routines that you can have that help you feel grounded. There's a lot of examples of this. One of the ones that I like is like to get up and like to start by just having some water. Right? So the first thing I do before I have any input, before I put caffeine in my body, before I turn my computer on, before I look at my phone, I just sit for 5 minutes and I have a glass of water. And that anchors me. What it does is it allows me to get up without stress. My body and my brain are not bracing themselves for input. What's the inbox going to say? What's on social media? Who got back to me? What's happening? All the things. That's going to happen. I can get to that. I can take 5 minutes in the morning just to sit and have a glass of water. Or I can let my dog out. I can just no input. But you want to anchor your time. All right, I want you to think about a few repeatable routines that you can have that help you feel grounded. Right? Time in a sauna, cold plunge. There's lots of ways to get at this that also amplify kind of performance and mental clarity as well. They don't have to be that though. Right? You can literally just go outside and stand on the grass. That would be fine too. But think about what those performance anchors are. Next is I want you to think about the minimum effective dose. So this is what we call minimum effective dose thinking. Is what's the baseline required to stay in motion? So yes, we have big goals. Yes, we have lofty things we want to accomplish. Yes, all these things. However, sometimes just the minimum dose is fine. Not every single day, every single task, every single thing has to be better than the last input. Sometimes baseline, minimum effective dose required to stay in motion. Right? Do I want to build my fitness? Absolutely. But a lot of days I can just go on an easy run. A lot of days I can just do some push-ups or pull-ups, right? It doesn't have to be harder every single day, and work. Not every single day has to be better than the last, right? Sometimes we can just, what's that minimum effective dose? Can we have a good day with my team? Can I just focus on having a good team meeting? Right? Maybe we're not going to close that deal today. Maybe I'm not going to hire that new person. Maybe all the pieces and parts and stars aren't going to align. So what's that minimum effective dose? What's the baseline where I can agree and define that we were still successful? And I think, again, we just want to get out of the habit of like reaching, right? Yes, reach. but sometimes not. Sometimes it's fine. That doesn't mean that we failed. It certainly doesn't mean anything about us, right? It doesn't mean that that's a reflection on our self-worth or our identity that we didn't get a little bit better today. And then I want you to do a weekly energy audit. I want you to really think about this. If you walk away with nothing else, this is the thing that I want you to do. So what energized you? I want you to look at your calendar, wherever you keep your information, and I want you to really ask yourself this. Do the audit. What energized you? What drained you? And what's worth repeating? So again, look at your week. Doing this on Sunday, if you're on a regular kind of normal calendar week, doing this on Sunday is helpful. So you ask yourself what energized you, what drained you, and what's worth repeating. And when you do this and you answer these questions honestly, then look for opportunities for growth. Okay, so if there's something worth repeating, how can you do it again? If there's things that energized you, how can you implement more of that into your schedule? Put it on your calendar. All right, I'm not saying leave it up to chance. And if there's things that drains you, how can you take some action to minimize those things? Now, I know that there are things that we cannot control. I know that there's things that are immovable. I know that there's input that we don't have control over. There's bosses, there's employees, there's clients, there's it rains, it snows, all the things. I hear you. Just start to take stock. Just work the muscle. Maybe nothing happens this week. Ask yourself next week, what energized you? What drains you? What's worth repeating? Eventually, you will start to see some opportunity present itself. You'll start to recognize what it looks like to just default to more of that parasympathetic, right? Default to less high cortisol, less fight or flight, more parasympathetic. And even if you made a 5% difference, I promise you it will feel dramatically different. So I'm not saying that you're going to overhaul your life and you're going to be someone who's totally chill and, all the time. Maybe not. Looking for incremental changes, looking for small shifts that can allow us to tap into some of these restful states. And I think this weekly energy audit is one of the most effective ways to do that in a low dose way that just helps us train that muscle. And so I want you, again, one, I want to reiterate that I am talking about this because it's something that, one, I care deeply about. Two, I've recognized that it's been a massive problem in my own life. And I use that language intentionally. I say problem because it is a problem if the way that I'm going about things keeps me from accomplishing my goals and keeps me from showing up in the world in alignment with who I want to be and what I want to accomplish. And so if there is something that is stopping me from that, I see that as a problem and I see it as something that needs to be addressed and I'm going to put very real energy into. So I want you to think about what can be one off switch this week, right? I want you to do your energy audit, and then I want you to think about what's one opportunity, what's one thing just for a few minutes you can do to turn off. And then I want you to ask yourself, what would it feel like to pursue performance with less tension? Again, here's the balance. I'm not saying that I want you to slow down. I'm saying that I want you to move forward in a different way. I want you to recruit different mechanisms, different ways of thinking so that you can move forward and actually sustain that performance and reach untapped levels of performance because we've been consistently low grade run down for a very long time. So I want you to ask yourself, what would it feel like to pursue performance with less tension? And when you do those three things, I want you to just take notes. So again, you're going to do the energy audit. You're going to look for small opportunities for that off switch this week. And then you're going to ask yourself, what would it feel like to pursue performance with less tension? When you do that, I want you to write those things down. want you to be honest with yourself, and I want you to rinse and repeat, right? This is not going to change overnight. It's not going to change this week, but it will change over time. It is a muscle to be worked. And I promise you, you will see results if you take it seriously and you recognize that this is not the path to optimal performance, and that there are other ways to achieve your goals and be a high performer without remaining in a hypervigilant state. So, as always, I hope this was helpful. Hope you can apply some of these things right now. Hope you can start to move the needle. Hope you can think about things differently based on this conversation. And lastly, as always, I hope that you will share this with a friend. I hope if you're enjoying Endurance Minded, you'll rate it, you'll subscribe, get updated on our new episodes every other Tuesday. Going into our 7th year, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful to all of our endurance-minded listeners, our community. You guys are incredible, and I hope that if any of this resonated, you'll share it with a friend. I'm here to be a value add. I'm here to help any way I can, so pass it along. It would mean the world to me, and until then, I'll see you next time on Endurance Minded.